The South African and African creative realm has come into its own over the past few decades, to the point that the whole world is watching, looking to Africa for inspiration, answers and guidance. For this week's episode, we're coming to you from the architectural heritage landmark of Turbine Hall in Newtown to explore the creative world of interior design as well as photography. We speak to the visionaries and the thought leaders that are at the forefront of African creativity. I'm your host, Ayanda Tabete, and this is Africa Modern. In this week's episode of Africa Modern, we're exploring design with a local South African twist.
So you know that Benoni boot character, that became just a thing.
Then we take a look at African-inspired interior design and home decor with Busaka Interiors.
We actually love the fact that old and new are kind of like merging.
And to finish off, we're catching up with creatives by chatting to product designer Bright Dimba and illustrator photographer Bontle Juku.
Don't wait for validation from other people, just do you.
To kick off today's show, we caught up with designer and illustrator Courtney Hodgson, whose creations are an appreciation of South African slang and a strong representation of culture and sense of community. Proudly from Benoni, she talks about her roots and how she uses her sense of humor to give her work a dynamic edge that is nothing short of lekker.
Illustration to me is a way of expression. I think there's only so many things that you can tell through physical storytelling with words, but once you add imagery to that, it really shows how the creative is thinking about the subject matter. How do they see things from their eyes? Growing up, I had quite a unique situation in the school front. I went to a school called Ashbury Preparatory in Crystal Park in Benoni. So I was the only white person in my class. And in a political environment, when you're a child, you don't realize that there's any differences. So we used to go and get quarters after school at the local spaza store, a kip on the side of the road, and basically the lingo started there, where you'd have to mix Zulu phrases and English phrases, and that's just how we kind of communicated. And then later on I moved to a school in Benoni for high school, and for those South Africans that know Benoni, it has quite a reputation. And it was very interesting to me how small towns got kind of this rep, and the way that you speak in different towns is different. So that Benoni boot character, that became just a thing in my mind. And then I moved to university in Pretoria, where all of a sudden everybody was Afrikaans. So it was a very interesting space to find myself in, having this third culture identity in which I was growing up. The way that I grew up really does play a role in how the products are formed. So a lot of the illustrations, you can see nuances from the different cultures that really influenced me, as well as the way that I engage with typography in my work. There's a real influence of the typography that can be found on spaza shops. Stuff like that really comes into the pieces that I make. A lot goes into the creation of a product. So it's obviously first ideation. Do I have an idea of something that could be something that consumers like? Then I usually go into sketching an image of the product. That goes into digital creation, and then it's about finding suppliers. So I'm lucky enough that my dad actually owns, it's a crazy connection, but he owns a scrapyard in Springs that sells cars, but they happen to have a graphics department where they also make stickers. So it just happened upon that I could make some of the products there. And then obviously I like to find proudly South African suppliers where I can. A lot of the stuff that I use is also biodegradable, so cardboard packaging for everything with as little waste as possible. But basically, yeah, I always try and do as much as I can by myself. I think it's very important if you want to make a lot of money with your product. If you can cut it by hand, you can save quite a lot of money instead of paying somebody to cut it by machine. So it's things like that. And I think also that just connects you with the products more. If you've really had a hand in cutting the products and packaging them by hand, it just makes it just that much more special. Inspiration comes out of the words, so a lot of the time I'll hear a new word or a new South African phrase, I write it down and I keep that in the little, like a dictionary if you will, and those kind of get used on products. So a lot of the time I'll think about things that are uniquely South African. So it's just about how can I take something that we know from our childhoods and take it into our future, our now, so that it reflects how we speak, but it's something that we can engage with on a nostalgic level, but also on a South African level. One of the main things that I'm challenged with as a creative and a person that owns a South African brand is towing the line between appreciation and appropriation. I think no matter what you do, if you are representing culture through your work, it's important to do your research. A lot of the time, if I am expressing things in Zulu, even though when I did grow up, those are words that I've been engaging with, it's important for me to have contact with somebody that speaks the language and that can understand culturally what I'm saying, so that I can make sure that I'm not going a little bit over the edge and assuming things about a specific culture. Even with Afrikaans, I think that's important. As a person that is English using Afrikaans words, I think it's always important to do your research and engage with people that do belong to that culture to make sure that you are representing it and celebrating it, rather than just assuming that the things that you are saying are correct. My advice to any young creative would be that there's so many more creative jobs that you can go into and that you can push yourself into that are quite different to those jobs that are expected of us as young adults, being a lawyer, being a doctor. And I think the only limitation that you can put on yourself is yourself. A lot of the time we have different views that haven't been expressed yet. So if you have a unique story to tell, the best place to tell it is through creativity. And never ever underestimate the power of your story. Because South Africa is such an eclectic mix of people, we've all grown up in different brackets. And I think it's really important to be able to tell your story as well as to hear other people's stories through your creativity.
Don't go anywhere, because after the break, we'll be taking a look at African-inspired interior design and home decor from Busaka Interiors. Welcome back to Africa Modern. There's been a big move towards balancing tradition with modern living. Busaka Interiors shows us how to utilize traditional African items in a modern world. Let's check them out.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Ali. We are the co-founders of Busaka Interiors. So Busaka Interiors is actually an interior design company. We do provide different services from interior design, the renovation, to interior decoration. We do home organization and decluttering, and we also have an online shop. Growing up, I've always had great passion for interior design. I could see my mom in the house. She was so obsessed with having clean everything making sense. And for Amanda as well, it was the same. She's always had the great passion for interior design. Africa is so beautiful, so we wanted to show something from there that the world can see and appreciate.
The kind of products that we offer are ethically sourced from Malawi, Zambia, and South Africa.
These are actually made at the lakeside lake show. So you would see these talented, amazing men and women who are actually hand producing these things, and to actually see the skill itself, the attention to the detail. And they're just making it to provide food on the table. So we thought, why not work hand in hand with the artisans and empower them so they can have a little bit more and not work as hard as they do. These are not products that are manufactured in factories. Humans are sitting down and making them. And we name our products because every product has a story. For instance, we have this Malawi chair that the whole world is calling it, but it's actually the Nicholas chair. I would say Nicholas because it's not supposed to sound fancy. So there was one of the missionaries who went to Malawi and wanted to have a piece in his house that he can use, since he couldn't have the fancy stuff that they always have abroad or outside Africa. So he sat down with the artisans and asked them, can you make me a chair? And he actually designed it himself. And they named it after the guy who was called Nicholas.
We do have an amazing selection of baskets that we offer. We have the Tonga baskets. A long time ago, they were used for fruits, but now with the modern aesthetics that's happening, a lot of people are using them on the walls. You can use them on the walls, you can use them as your trays as well. You can use them for your kitchen, for your coffees and your utensil holders, and then in your bedroom as well for your perfumes and all the little things that you just want to put out there but look pleasing as well.
But these are items that were used by our grandparents, their grandparents. It goes beyond ourselves. And to see it in the world being used in the United States, in the United Kingdom, Europe, China, and they're calling it Bohemian style. And you're like, okay, that is amazing. That's not Bohemian, but we'll call it that for now. It's actually a traditional piece from Africa, from Zambia.
We actually love the fact that old and new are kind of like merging and making this like a whole new vibe with regards to African interiors and aesthetics as well.
It will not be a trend, I must say. This is going to stay, and Africa will take over when it comes to producing the most amazing pieces that can be used in every design style that you can think of. So I think that's the coolest part about this movement that's happening right now.
You know, when I think of African interiors, I get so excited, mostly because it's ethically sourced. I feel like this season that we're in as an African aesthetic and also just interiors, it's going to stay for quite a long time because it's something that the world as well at large is thinking about. So for me, that really just like gives me this hope that we are actually going in the right direction. If we could only just like embrace it and find a way of working with the diversity that we have. I mean, when you look at Tanzania, they have different baskets. From Zambia, they have different baskets. From Malawi, from Uganda, from Nigeria, from South Africa. So this actually gets us so excited because it's things that actually are so different, but when you put them together, they work. They somehow work and they speak the same language. So for us, that's why we decided to really go into interiors with regards to like African interiors.
It's time for a break, but don't go anywhere because when we return, we'll be catching up with not one, but two African creatives. You don't want to miss it. this week's episode, we're coming to you from the architectural and heritage landmark of Turbine Hall in Newtown. Turbine Hall is an iconic building situated in the heart of the Arts and Culture Precinct in Newtown, Johannesburg. The building is an integral part of Johannesburg architectural history and started out as a power station for the city in the late 1920s. Although the power station was officially decommissioned in 1961, it was re-equipped and kept on standby as a backup power facility from the mid-1960s through the 1970s. By the early 1990s, the facility had fallen into disrepair. After years of neglect, the Turbine Hall was given a new lease on life in 2005, now looked after and managed by the Diversity Urban Property Fund. In the South African context, Diversity firmly believes in the importance of undoing apartheid-era spatial divides by developing integrated neighborhoods in centrally located areas and bringing about historically marginalized households that are typically pushed out to the urban edge, far from opportunity, into the urban core, and by doing so, making a difference to the present and future of our cities. Each week, we feature a segment titled Catching Up with Creatives. This is a platform to showcase established as well as up-and-coming creative talent. We receive content that has been filmed remotely by them in their own studios and spaces. We ask them a couple of questions just to get a glimpse into their lives. For this week's feature of Catching Up with Creatives, we caught up with two local creatives. First up, we meet Bright Dimba, who is taking the world by storm. He creates homeware and interior pieces that are a celebration of traditional African craftsmanship. Let's check him out.
My name is Bright Dimba and I'm a creative individual. I'm currently working in the field of interiors, product design and photography. I've always been passionate about arts and design from a very young age, and I've always tried to create, I've always tried to collaborate with people who share this same sentiment. My inspiration generally comes from everyday spaces, everyday people that I meet and even everyday objects. And then through photography, I capture these inspirations for my mood board just to conceptualize more ideas. Duada is more of a contemporary approach to the traditional wire weaving. Using traditional weaving technique to showcase the modern Africa to the world, you will find that every Duada piece is meant to remind us of the African excellence. It means a contemporary African aesthetic, but it also means more. It means more Africans coming together, it means more creative, it means more freedom of speech, freedom of expressions as a creative discipline. Well, for me, it's about collaborations. I'm more of a creative collaborator. It's not necessarily about being different, but it's about sharing ideas for a better and a sustainable future. Some of the highlights of my career will have to start with working with Mninizo, a craft company, which I got to travel the country and I got to meet different traditions and different cultures within South Africa. And then it will be thereafter going back to my hometown and collaborating with the local women crafters just to develop more arts and craft skills. It will have to be the balance between art, design and entrepreneurship. It will have to be the lack of support and the lack of creative career understanding from families. It will also have to be the grassroots level from the community, just presenting the idea of art and design as part of a solution to our current modern social ills. Well, I've been perfecting my weaving techniques because I'd also like to be able to make what I design. Like I said, we're currently working on more Tugata products, more on a bigger scale, on a more bolder scale. That is our current work you should be looking out for. Thank you very much.
Our second Catching Up with Creatives guest is up-and-coming photographer and illustrator Bontle Juku. She shares her journey into the industry as well as how her work is a representation of African youth today. Let's check her out.
Hope that was right. The three words I think I would use to describe my work would be minimalistic, narrative, and Afrocentric. I'm Bontle Juku, otherwise known as the Artistic Mind, and I am a photographer illustrator. How I got into photography actually was during a school trip, and I was with my best friend. So we're basically doing as tourists do, taking pictures, photographing almost everything we see around us, the people, the culture, the environment. And during that trip, we made the decision then to actually take photography seriously and look into it as a profession. So pretty much ever since that day, photography has been my main medium in my creative journey. The biggest highlights in my career has to be Design Indaba. It was an amazing opportunity with an amazing experience, and I got to meet so many different people and so many different creatives, and be exposed to different mediums of creativity and different minds, and it was just absolute fun, aside from all the opportunities that came with that experience. The challenges I've faced as a creative have definitely been finding my own unique voice and my unique stories in my work, and definitely fighting for those stories. And I think also, especially with the industry of photography, definitely navigating that space, predominantly male space as a Black woman, has been a challenge at times, but it is a challenge and an experience that I'm grateful for because it's taught me and continues to teach me a lot of lessons. I wanted to serve as a form of a monument of Black youth today and their expression of identity and who they are and their stories, and in some sense to also confront the viewer with those stories and those identities, and to show people that we're here and we are the moment. Africa Modern for me defines the shift and the rebirth of African narratives and African identity as we're seeing in present day Africa today, whereby us as Africans and us as Black people are in charge of and have taken back ownership of our stories and our identity. Advice that I would have for upcoming creators and photographers is definitely to trust yourself and to trust the process, and not to wait to have the best equipment or the best camera or all the resources at your disposal. Sometimes your best work comes out of working with what you have, so don't wait for that or wait for validation from other people, just do you.
It's been so fun taking you through this week's episode. Join us next week as we continue to explore the creatives that call Africa home. Let's continue the conversation on social media using the hashtag AfricaModern. Until then, I'm your host, Ayanda Tabete, and this is Africa Modern.